Morning of February 28, 2026, the Middle East awoke to explosions, smoke rising over Tehran, and a moment that will redefine global geopolitics. But this wasn't a sudden flare-up. It was years in the making, and today we're going to break it all down, step by step, with clarity and context. This is US and Israel strike Iran. What just happened? Explained. Before we dive into what happened, let's understand why this event is so significant. For decades, tensions between Iran, the United States, and Israel have simmered, fueled by distrust, nuclear ambitions, proxy conflicts, and a history of regional power struggles. But in early 2026, those simmering tensions finally erupted into a full-blown military confrontation. It's not just another strike. It's the largest coordinated offensive involving the US and Israel in recent Middle Eastern history. It has reshaped alliances, triggered retaliation, and raised alarm across the world. To truly understand February 2026, we have to look back. Years of hostility, failed diplomacy, and military escalation set the stage. Iran's nuclear program, seen by Tehran as defensive, was viewed by Israel and Washington as an existential threat. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the 2015 nuclear agreement, once limited Iran's nuclear program. But after the US withdrew in 2018, that fragile deal collapsed. Iran expanded enrichment, and regional proxy tensions grew. By early 2026, the Iranian economy was in crisis. Protests were sweeping cities, and the government's power was declining. But its missile and military programs remained strong. Then came February 28th, a coordinated, unprecedented strike, in what officials call Operation Lion's Roar, and what some sources refer to as Operation Epic Fury. The Israeli and United States militaries launched a daytime offensive across Iranian territory. Hundreds of targets were hit: strategic military facilities, missile systems, command centers, and critical infrastructure. Over 500 targets were struck across the country, marking one of the largest coordinated air offensives in recent memory. But the most dramatic moment of all, the targeting of Iran's supreme leader, a figure whose influence shaped the region for decades. In a breathtaking twist, Iranian state media and international reporting confirmed that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader since 1989, was killed during the attack. Reports indicate that the strike on his secure compound was precise and sudden, crafted from months of intelligence and tracking by both CIA and Israeli agencies. Alongside Khamenei, many senior commanders and government officials were killed, including IRGC leaders and military chiefs. At this point, the narrative shifts from tactical strikes to political upheaval. This is not only about military targets, it is about the very structure of power in Tehran. Leaders in Washington and Jerusalem framed the operation as a defensive necessity. According to official statements, the goal was to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons and to defend regional allies and American forces. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu publicly said that Iran must not be allowed to arm itself with nuclear weapons, while US statements emphasized the threat posed by Iranian ballistic missiles. But when strikes of this scale take place, there are consequences, reactions that span far beyond a single day's headlines. When a strike happens between regional powers like Israel, the United States, and Iran, the first question is never what happened. The real question is, what happens next? Because in the Middle East, retaliation is not optional. It's expected. Iran rarely responds in a simple, direct way. Instead, it uses a strategy often called asymmetric retaliation. That means cyber attacks, proxy militia strikes, missile launches from allied groups, disruption of shipping routes, targeting US bases indirectly. Iran has spent decades building influence through proxy groups in Lebanon, Hezbollah, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Houthis. These networks give Tehran options without immediately triggering full-scale war. If Iran responds directly, it risks massive escalation. If it responds indirectly, it maintains deniability and keeps the conflict in the grey zone. After any major strike involving Iran: 1. US military bases in Iraq, Syria, and the Gulf region go on high alert. 2. Israel activates missile defense systems like Iron Dome and Arrow. 3. Oil prices begin to rise. 4. Global markets react within hours. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which about 20% of global oil passes, becomes a critical flashpoint. Even the threat of disruption there can shake global energy markets. At the heart of US-Israel-Iran tensions lies one core issue: Iran's nuclear program. Israel sees a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat. The US position has shifted over the years from diplomacy, the 2015 nuclear deal, to sanctions, to strategic pressure. Iran maintains its program is for peaceful energy purposes, but enrichment levels and uranium stockpiles have repeatedly raised international concerns. This isn't just about missiles or airstrikes. It's about the fear of a nuclear threshold, the moment when diplomacy no longer works. That's the question analysts are asking. Full-scale war would involve Israeli air power, US naval forces in the Gulf, Iranian missile barrages, proxy group mobilization, cyber warfare. But here's the key: none of the three actors, US, Israel, or Iran, truly benefits from all-out war, which is why most escalations historically stop short of total conflict. They flare, they threaten, they de-escalate, at least temporarily. Whenever tensions spike, Europe calls for restraint. Russia and China issue strategic statements. The UN urges immediate de-escalation. Oil markets spike. Defense stocks rise. Airlines reroute flights. This isn't a local story, it's global. Because Middle East stability affects energy markets, shipping routes, global inflation, military alliances. Behind the geopolitics, civilians brace for uncertainty. In Israel, air raid sirens, defensive systems activated. In Iran, public statements of resilience, economic pressure, fear of further strikes. And in the region, families wonder if this is temporary tension or the start of something larger. So where does this go from here? Toward negotiation or toward a wider regional confrontation? History tells us something important about moments like this. They rarely stay frozen. They move toward escalation, toward containment, or toward negotiation. Right now, the region stands at a crossroads. This is the most common historical pattern. In this scenario, Iran responds, but in a calculated way. Missile strikes through proxy groups, cyber attacks, harassment of shipping lanes, limited retaliation, strong enough to show strength, but not strong enough to trigger full-scale war. Israel responds with targeted strikes. The United States increases deterrence, deploying naval assets, reinforcing regional bases. But both sides quietly avoid crossing red lines. This is the dance of deterrence, dangerous, unstable, but contained. This kind of limited confrontation has happened before in the region. It raises tensions, it spikes oil prices, it creates headlines, but it stops short of total war. Now we move into a more dangerous possibility. But what if one missile lands in the wrong place? What if civilian casualties change the political calculation? What if a proxy group acts beyond control? In this scenario, Hezbollah joins directly from Lebanon. US bases in Iraq face sustained attacks. Israel expands air operations. Iran launches direct missile salvos. This becomes a multi-front conflict, not a world war, but a major regional war. Even in this scenario, full invasion is unlikely. Why? Because Iran is geographically large and difficult to invade. Israel lacks capacity for prolonged ground war in Iran. The US public appetite for another major Middle East war is low, so escalation would likely stay aerial, naval, cyber, and proxy-based. Still devastating, but different from conventional war. This may seem unlikely during escalation, but history shows something surprising. Major confrontations often lead to new negotiations. Sometimes the most intense moments create the greatest pressure for diplomacy. Behind closed doors, back-channel talks begin. European mediators step in. Regional actors push for stability. Sanctions become leverage. Nuclear terms return to the table. Conflict becomes a forcing mechanism for negotiation. Could this crisis become the foundation for a new agreement, or has trust been permanently broken? That's the strategic uncertainty. No matter which scenario unfolds, consequences ripple outward. Even minor instability in the Strait of Hormuz can raise oil prices, increase shipping insurance costs, affect global inflation. Energy shocks affect Europe, Asia, and developing economies disproportionately. Global alliances. NATO members watch closely. Russia and China assess opportunities. Gulf states balance relationships carefully. Defense partnerships deepen. This conflict influences more than just 3 countries. It reshapes regional alignment. If escalation continues, Iran may accelerate nuclear enrichment. If diplomacy resumes, inspection regimes may return. The long-term question remains: will this crisis delay nuclear escalation or accelerate it? That answer will define the next decade in the Middle East. Behind every headline, families worry, markets react, soldiers prepare, diplomats negotiate quietly, geopolitics feels abstract, but instability is lived in real time by millions of people. Moments like this remind us how fragile stability can be. Decades of tension, one strike, and the world shifts. Whether this becomes a brief escalation or the start of a larger transformation depends on choices made in the coming days. In war rooms, in diplomatic corridors, and behind closed doors, what do you think happens next? Controlled tension, regional expansion, or renewed diplomacy? Let me know in the comments.